Hey, RetconRaider here, and welcome back to Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. As today we take a moment to see what's on the minds of our crew. You know, in the absolutely worst way possible, but in the end it is the thought that counts. However, before we get into that, I should note we're already on site because I was just finalizing our skill respecs, which for the most part were just skills. You'll notice I already took care of our level ups as well. Again, it was just skills, but now redistributed over our new squad layout so that we have all of our angles covered. For example, obviously Valen popped out his Xenos lore chip and put in a Warp lore chip instead. I also made some very slight changes to his overall talent loadout, but I think the only one worth mentioning is dropping Sharpshooter for ballistic calculations. No change on Abby. And then for Pask, however, we did go ahead and dump Medicae. He's ceded authority on that to Cabela, and has instead invested in demolitions. My general thoughts there being that we're always going to need a demo character in our core squad, and Pask is pretty much a fixture. He was the number one most requested companion in my latest Raider companion poll, which makes sense. I mean, he's great. And then, you know, while I had him cracked open, I shuffled a few other things around too, mostly dropping Steel of the Forge, which hasn't worked in quite some time now, for an agility medium armor build. And we're just going full melee on him at this point. I've given up any allusions to a hybrid melee range build. For Cabela, again, obviously went full Medicae. You can see that right there. She is killing it. She's exceeded where Pascal was, and because we were going full Medicae with her, I did also go ahead and swap off of Assassin to Executioner, because Executioner has several abilities that scale off of Medicae, which is why, for example, she suddenly has almost twice as many wounds as Abelard. Couldn't really figure out what to do with her secondary skill. I thought about going Xenos, because there is also a talent that lets her scale her Xenos lore off of her Medicae, but it just made more sense to let Yurliette handle that, since she's kind of literally built for it. But yeah, then aside from that, I just really wasn't sold on Dance Macabre. You know, we tried it the one time. It got pretty underwhelming results compared to her just standard Death from Above Whirlwind move. So I figured we'd just lean into the whole blood and bleeding mechanics of the Executioner instead. See how that works out for us. Which I do have cautiously high hopes for, because some of those talents, when combined with 160 Medicae, do get kind of bonkers, especially if certain mechanics interact the way I think they do. Like, for example, the tactical boots that push people away when they try to opportunity attack, combined with the Executioner talent to automatically inflict internal bleeding, scaling off of Medicae when you push someone. That should theoretically have some pretty hilarious results, but we're going to have to get out in the field to actually test that stuff out. I may need to make a few changes on the fly as we see what does and doesn't work with her kind of bonkers bleed build. No changes to Cass. She's perfect the way she is. And then Yurliette. And yeah, as previously alluded with her, since we now have Pask handling demo, we had her switch from demo to Xenos lore, which just made sense because her entire preset base class is already built for that, which actually let her exceed Valen's score by 5 points. A modest gain, but still a slight improvement. And then we also really leaned into awareness this time out. Since she was no longer doing demo, I cut her agility back a bit and slid those points over into intelligence and perception instead, to help shore up her core skills. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go have a word with the wise. Choirmaster Wise turns towards you long before you reach him. A chill runs down your spine, as if someone were watching you from inside your own being. The strange sensation passes as suddenly as it arises. The choirmaster shakes his head. I know why you're here, your lordship, and with all due respect, I am asking you to reconsider. So you'd rather not help me find whatever's lurking on our lower decks? It is my wish to be useful to your lordship, but what you have come for will put the ship in peril. A ritual of this kind can, and certainly will, go the worst way possible. Your predecessor came to me with the same orders once. Nothing good came of it. Please believe me, Lord Captain, when I say a mountain of corpses was the least of the problems we faced that time. But you did perform the ritual once before for my predecessor. Why then and not now? Many years ago, it was a time when Lady Theodora had become anxious. Perhaps the Lord Inquisitor's interest in her affairs adversely affected her, shall we say, trust in her subjects. She was expecting a betrayal, and eventually her paranoia brought her to me. I performed the ritual, but the choir ceased to exist. I remember that day, Lord Captain. When we arrived at the chapel, there was blood and human remains everywhere. But that was the least of the terrifying things we saw there. The Asuriani spend decades tempering their spirits before touching the veil. You lack the gift of time, yet you seek to harness powers that are only too pleased with your ignorance. Your warnings are noted, but I'd still like to know how this ritual works. It takes the entire choir's power to invade such a prodigious number of minds at once. I weave their voices into a chord, and steer it into the murky sea of other people's souls. Together we read tens of thousands of thoughts, emotions, and intents, looking for things we are after. The seed of corruption you are interested in. Right, though clearly there are some risks involved. Lord Captain, do you know the proverb about staring too long into the abyss? What you are asking for is tantamount to plunging the entire choir into that abyss. A ritual like that will require incredible focus from each of its participants. It will take a single careless thought, a single glance in the wrong direction, for the way back to be lost. Human minds fusing into one another, vitrified organs inside still living bodies, perverse fantasies manifesting in the flesh. Nothing will stop the horrors of the warp from spreading all over the ship in the blink of an eye. And even if I agreed, it would be impossible. I would need a second powerful telepath as a defender to shield my mind. The last time my best apprentice, Adeline, did that. But she is no longer with us. She was exceptionally talented, rivaling even myself. Now I know of only one psyker in the entire expanse who is her equal. But he is bound to the service of one of House Winterscale's planetary governors, and thus unavailable to us, which makes your dangerous enterprise an impossibility. Brass tacks wise, just how bad was it, really?
Worse.
than you can imagine, your lordship. It only took a fraction of a second lingering inside another mind for one of the astropaths to lose control of their own. The affliction spread down the chain like fire. No one was spared. The minds of my charges could not withstand the tension. Their consciousnesses were caught in a vortex of alien thoughts. The fortunate ones died at once. As for the rest... And yet you managed to survive. Are you saying that you can't learn from your mistakes and possibly perform it better this time? I managed to survive because I sent out a call for help and did my best to contain the phantoms on my own before Lady Theodora arrived. I was the only survivor out of the entire choir. Her ladyship allowed me to spend a month in a secluded cell, upon whose floors and walls I drew the most powerful protective hexagrams I knew. I was crushed. I was broken. And worst of all, I was afraid. Afraid of meeting the same fate as Adeline and my other apprentices. An astropath must never be afraid, your lordship. One who yields to fear dies and dooms those around them. I was under the impression that astropaths were a scarce resource if the entire choir was wiped out. How did the flagship recover? Lady Theodora bombarded the Adeptus Administratum for months with requests to provide her with a new astropathic choir. In the end, new voices did fill the chapel. They were never told what happened to the previous choir, but they have an inkling, and I pray to the God Emperor that they never find out the details of that tragedy. Given the risks involved, is this ritual even permitted by the Imperium? It is not heresy, but it is indeed a dangerous tool that will only yield to a mighty hand. That time things were going all too well. The choir was many-voiced like never before. Adeline and my other talented apprentices sounded louder than the rest of the astropaths in all of the expanse. We were strong and confident enough to take a bold gamble. And we lost. Well, that's not technically true, is it? I mean, even after all that, you did find what my predecessor was looking for. The choir master cowers, as if cornered. I did find it. But the price! Yes, Lady Theodora got the name she wanted. But was it worth it? The tragedy has remained a secret hidden within the chapel. But we were a hair's breadth away from it becoming an epitaph inscribed on the ship's remains. Yeah, I mean, that honestly just kind of sounds like how she ran things. Seems to have worked out okay for her right up until it didn't. That said, to be fair, based on what he's telling us, their big misstep was not having Theodora and her retinue nearby to rush in and help once things inevitably went awry. Please, Lord Captain, learn from her mistakes instead of committing your own. Can't make any promises there. That is the harsh truth, your lordship. It must not be done. I mean, you say that wise, but you also gave me a pretty obvious plot hook to pursue. What if we were to find this other psyker you said could help shield your mind? Oh? And who is it? The choir master's smile, though courteous, seems ever so slightly sarcastic. Adira? Absolutely not! This is the first time you've ever heard the choir master raise his voice. She is a witch, an abomination. She will only make the situation worse. The beasts of the warp will sense her heresy-prone soul and descend upon us in droves. Alright, well, what about Hyrix? He's pretty much the opposite of Adira in many, many ways. Perhaps he could be of better use. Master Van Kalox is a brilliant biomancer, your lordship. But as far as I know, he is not particularly adept at telepathy or Psyker's protective rituals, is he? Fair enough. And what about the obvious plot hook, the unnamed powerful Psyker you mentioned? Who might that be? Master Harriman is a seasoned telepath, but his lord would never part with such an incredibly valuable specialist. A sizable amount of money will be necessary to organize Master Harriman's escape. Perhaps you have some useful contacts at your disposal who could assist the unfortunate Harriman with his situation? Gosh, Wise, you know, I may just be able to swing that. I'll put in some calls and let you know how it turns out. As you please. Master Harriman will welcome the news of his forthcoming release. His present lord is quite unpleasant. I will report back once Master Harriman has been brought on board. Ah, okay. So another interlude, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you can kind of see the breakpoints where all of this plot we're rolling through right now would have been naturally split up amongst all the other various incidents from Act 1 and Act 2. But, of course, because we're coming into it so late into the campaign already, they're all kind of dogpiled. Apparently we did it just in time, though. Apparently, once you start Act 3, it actually does cut off all the DLC story stuff, if you haven't properly initiated it by then. Which does bode poorly for our eventual second companion DLC, but you know, I have thought about that. And what I'll likely do is set a save in advance, like a hard save right at the end of Act 2. Just so when we do get to that point, we can kind of have a flashback interlude, you know, running through all of his setup stuff, just so we can make sure he's still involved in Act 3 and 4, you know, wherever it is we are when that DLC finally does drop. It'll be some extra work, but, you know, I've enjoyed this DLC enough that I really don't want to just completely skip out on the other.
Domin.
Cabela merrily sprays you with blood, as is her custom. Cabela, in light of the recent bloodbath, it occurs to me that I really should dig a bit deeper into the exact history and nature of the cult I have found myself contending with. Would you mind if I ask some questions?
The Vizier taught us that there are many like us throughout the Imperium who spill blood in his name. Death cultists, as they call us. He said that no two death cults are the same, just as there are no two identical stars in the void. I will tell you about the blood-spun web, but I cannot speak on behalf of all death cults.
You know, that's fair. I wasn't really concerned with all the other death cults, just the one that is currently living on my ship. So you guys, you're just like a single-purpose cult. You only exist to protect the RetconRaider?
The blood-spun web holds the bays of the flagship together with the threads of its faith. Such is our service to the Domini of the von Valancius line. The Undying One commanded the Domini to embark on a ship and sail the void's expanse. And thus, it became our duty to protect your dynasty and the Ark that became its home. This great relic of blood and adamantine. Some loathe and fear us. They call us murderers and reapers. Others call us dancers of death, who send the souls of the dead on their way. Both are right. Both are wrong. We are servants of the Undying Emperor. When he whispers that the time has come for a righteous martyr's soul to be laid in his blessed hands, we come to claim it. When he whispers that the wicked must know of his wrath, we come to reap. This is how we maintain order on the ship, unseen and guided by death's will.
Right. See, that is one of my slight points of concern. You hear voices in your heads that tell you to kill, and then you just do. You've never considered that the voices you're hearing might not actually be the Emperor?
Death's whisper is unmistakable. It is not like the murmur of stars or the hiss of corruption. It is truthful, pure, unyielding. Only the most eminent of us, the High Spinners, can hear the whisper of the Undying One and give voice to his will. They must hone their senses and temper their body and soul for years before his call can reach them. If it puts you more at ease, you can think of these whispers as his providence.
Cabela shakes her head slowly. Yeah, I can't really say that puts my mind much at ease, Kibbles, considering your spinner training apparently erases your memories. Since at that point, the voice would be pretty much all you really know. So you're saying this voice, the Emperor, has never led you astray? Every single name it's whispered to you has been someone truly deserving of death?
We are carried along by a current of blood in the great river of fate. Life is not given or taken away by chance. If I see an enemy of humanity, my blade will sever the thread of their existence. I will not wait for a sign of his divine bidding. I am his will, and I do what must be done.
I mean, sure, you're far from the first servant of the Imperium I've encountered who has a similar mindset, but still, be that as it may, I do find such a thirst for death to be somewhat off-putting. I mean, I kill people too, but I put a lot of thought into who and why, as well as the potential long-term ramifications.
There is no thirst, only duty. Killing brings us no pleasure. We are instruments of his will, and this is how we serve him.
Hey, whatever you say. All right, we'll just move on for now. Cabela stares at you intently, perhaps too intently. She says nothing. Yeah, that's me at parties. So tell me, Cabela, how long has the cult been on the RetconRaider? I've gotten some general conflicting info there.
Spinners carved the chronicles of our history on the stones of our temple long ago. But fate and time have erased our past, just as an exploding star erases a part of the galaxy from existence.
Right, so you don't know. Implication is a long time, but their formative event seems to overlap with an incident that happened much more recently. And the fact that all the spinners seem to have no memories and had minimal overlap with Theodora does make me wonder. The first spinner. What can you tell me about him?
It is the Visier's duty to watch over the flock, to lead those who want to learn more of the Undying One, but are fearful of death, and guide those who seek answers in death, but do not know how to live. The Visier protects all, those who do not know we exist, those who are grateful for our service, and even those who hate us. The Visier sees what is to come, remembers the past, and accepts the present. They spin a web of faith and blood so strong that no enemy may sunder it. This is the Visier's burden. This is the legacy of the matriarch spider.
Right, yeah, of course. The matriarch spider, your cult's figurative broodmother, correct?
It is said that she was one of many, born in the void, the Domin's subject. She honored death instead of life, and for this, she was persecuted. It is said that when the arch-enemy's forces invaded the flagship during a warp jump, she gathered the Undying One's servants around her and saved the ship from ruin. Together, they spun the first threads of the web to ensure that such devastation would never happen again. It is said that she was strong and indomitable, but as the years passed, her heart became as stone, and thus, the Undying One whispered her name to the one who would become the first Visier of the blood-spun web.
Oh, interesting. Though, that's not the current Vizier, as far as you're aware. Though really, I mean, that just adds even more ways to potentially compromise the cult, you know, if someone can just claim control of the cult by killing their predecessor and claiming the Emperor told them to do it. I assume you're called Spinners in honor of the matriarch?
Through blood, sweat, tears, and the strength of their convictions, the servants of the Undying One spin the souls of your subjects into threads of balance. This is why we refer to ourselves as spinners. Those who are newly committed to the blood-spun web are called lesser spinners. If they are faithful in their service to him, they may eventually become spinners. The most devout of us all are known as the High Spinners, of whom there are 7, each bearing a unique title. The Visier, the first spinner, leads the cult. I, Kibella, am the second spinner. The third spinner's name is Io, and there are 4 more.
Ooh, new name, Io. Okay, well that might be the one who visited poor Gweden. Also, obviously named for the moon of Jupiter and or the woman from Greek mythology, the one... I want to say that's the one who got turned into a cow. 7. That is a peculiar number for a spider cult. Unless we're counting the Emperor as number 8. Or the late matriarch. You know, there are some who might object to holding the Emperor up as an aspect of death.
The Undying One is death itself. We serve him, and thus we serve death. This is not a comparison, attribution, or preference. It is the truth, and nothing can change it.
Cabela frowns. I must admit, Cabela, while I don't necessarily... I do have some general concerns about the cult and your methods. I am intrigued. I don't suppose you could further elaborate on the tenets your cult follows?
The tenets are knowledge, an art that is passed down from one generation of the blood-spun web to the next. Even so, there are spinners who will never fully comprehend this knowledge in the time allotted to them by the Undying One. The tenets dictate how one follows the thread of life, but they are also the thread itself, from first breath to last. The tenets cannot be taught, they must be lived. Only then will you understand.
Right, so you're essentially describing a multi-generational game of telephone. That just raises more concerns, but... Thank you. Cabela nods, slightly. So, the Emperor's Tarot, and I'd like to ask about that, too. If death talks directly to you, where exactly does the tarot come in? How does that work?
I use blood to read his sacred cards and hear the whisper of the Undying One. His tarot is not an answer, but a question I ask of the universe. And the universe answers with questions of its own. In this sacred communion, I perceive hundreds of possible outcomes. They are all true, and yet they are only visions. I know what will come to pass, and yet I do not.
I mean, yeah, not to put too fine a point on it, but that is generally how readings work. If you're not an actual, psychic, sensitive precog or diviner.
I am the spear of his retribution, not a witch or a sorcerer or a soothsayer. I have no strange powers, but I do bear his blessing. I do not command the veil. I am guided by his whisper and led by my faith, by the tenets. Please, do not mistake me for something I am not.
Cabela's brow furrows. You occasionally feel a shiver run down your spine, or detect faint sparks in the air when you are standing next to Cabela. It seems her powers only manifest when she is practicing divination, or in moments of pious exaltation. Cabela herself does not seem to be aware of her gift. Oh, that's interesting. Wow. Seems like we chose the perfect time to suddenly become an expert in all things warped. So she is unknowingly psychic sensitive, but only as like a receiver, not a transmitter. Hey, if you've lived on this ship for generations, how exactly did you come across such a potent relic?
It is a holy relic that has been passed down from generation to generation. Only the first and second spinners are allowed to study the sacred cards and interpret their meaning. We use his tarot to guide the cult and discern the tangled threads of fate.
Yep, that tracks. How many cards are in your deck? Are we just talking the major 22, or do we have the minors in there as well?
34. There used to be more, but some have perished in the darkness of time. Their loss is a great tragedy for the blood-spun web.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say, you're definitely using minors. That is less than half of a deck. I feel like that would give you some pretty inherently skewed readings. I don't suppose you could give me a reading. I would very much like to see this relic in action.
Ask the cards, Domin, and I will listen.
Cabela carefully takes out her Imperial Tarot deck. A black blade flashes before your eyes, and blood drips from her palm onto the cards. She closes her eyes and listens. Oh shit, you have it right here. Okay, well, tell me then, what does the future have in store for yours truly? Cabela draws 4 cards from the deck and lays them face down before you.
The first card is the young warrior. It suggests inexperience, a path of becoming. The second card is the shattered world inverted. The path will have twists, turns, and thorns, but you will gather allies along the way and find what was lost. The third, the hound inverted. Someone has marked you as their prey and is chasing you through a field of traps. The lost child. You will leap into one of those traps of your own free will and place your trust in someone truly desperate.
Huh. I mean, very vague, very open to interpretation, pretty standard tarot shenaniganery. Young Warrior's obviously us. That's the prologue. Shattered World is probably Rykad Minoris. The Hound could be Conrad or his boss. Cabela nods slightly. The Lost Child. Likely a nod to something later in the game, though, so vague and abstract as to be utterly useless. Until it is reconsidered in retrospect. Honestly, I'm not even convinced the tarot she's using is real, which may be the reason she's been allowed to keep it. Man, I don't know. This is interesting. I'm trying to guess where it's all going, but we're just too early on, I think. Need more data.
May the Undying One shroud your footsteps from the faithless.
Sure, you too. The obvious first place my brain goes is that the cult is a sham, that the Vizier isn't what he represents himself to be, that he uses the tenets, the tarot, to control his followers, with the highest ranking of them, the spinners, being unwitting psychic sensitives who he transmits messages directly to under the guise of it being, the word of the Emperor. But, if he were part of the Gene Stealer cult, why would he work towards exposing them here? Other than, perhaps, to lure us into a trap, part of a grand ploy or a gambit to co-opt a rogue trader into the Gene Stealer cult's ever-expanding web. Oh, and we're gonna round out with some quick bath time. Go ahead and bank that bonus before our next fight. Spend some quality time with our crew. Ooh, can we bank extra ideology points? No. Okay, that's fair. But we can still invite someone to join us, and as per the Raider poll, I do have a list of priorities. I already kind of jumped the gun with Cassie, which I do not regret. But next on the list is my boy Pascal, the number 1 companion, most popular with the Raiders. Let's share some quality time with our Exsellsior, shall we? At once! An oily patch spreads slowly outward from the Magos. The smell of lubricant fills the bath chamber.
This receptacle is deemed adequate for the execution of the cleaning protocol.
Pask, buddy, wow, just right into the bath, huh? Gotta say, I really kind of expected you to express some degree of puzzlement as to why you were even here, but I respect that kind of decisiveness.
I have received an invitation to perform collective ablutions. Ablutions are impossible to perform without submerging into the bathing receptacle.
You know what? You are 1000% correct. I cannot argue with that. I'm just a little concerned that you seem to be leaking?
This statement is true. The disposal of waste substances is an integral part of the cleaning protocol.
Sure, yeah, it's just normally we dispose of our waste materials in other receptacles. Also, you still have your clothes on?
It is prohibited to expose the true flesh in the presence of lay people. My raiment will not hinder the cleaning protocol.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. We do have some other randos in the room with us. The water's not going to cause any issues for you, is it? It's not going to, like, mess up your parts?
No. The Omnissiah has granted the sacred chromium resistance to the plague of rust.
Right, yeah, of course. Silly me. Well, you know what? I did invite you, so I certainly don't mind if you help yourself. I can certainly spare some water for a washing machine.
This unit is grateful for the invitation. It will exit the receptacle upon completion of the cleaning protocol.
Oh yeah? Just out of curiosity, how long does that wash cycle take?
The procedure will take 1 standard ship hour.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, well, happy to have you. A little weird you're sitting right across from me, but, you know, we can share some small talk. Pascal emits a satisfied binaric aria.
I thank you for the invitation, Valen. This ablution will be recorded in this unit's archive of significant events.
Ah, well, it was my pleasure, bud. Always happy to share the wealth, at least with those who have earned it. Interesting. You know, of all the new content they've added in the DLC, I really do like the bonding bath times. I look forward to doing more, but yeah, we'll pace that out. Especially since I now do realize there is, in fact, an actual mechanical benefit for doing so. Yes, this right here. Well-deserved rest. Granted, relatively minor, it's just a one-time initiative bonus on our next fight, but it does give us all the more reason to basically take a bath between major events. Though, obviously, for someone like me, just the extra companion banter is more than reason enough. Also, apparently, we are now suffering a -5 willpower penalty from how things played out back in Act 1. I do not remember that penalty being there before. I think it was tacked on by one of the more recent patches, but I would have to go back and double check. It just kind of snuck in there at some point, which does kind of suck because our willpower was already not great. But, you know, I suppose it is fair considering how things did, in fact, play out. Heinrich's tried to warn us. That said, thusly refreshed, I feel like this is a good place to call it. Bit of a slower episode this time, but lots of interesting bits of lore and speculation to chew on. Not to mention, of course, as always, some good quality time with our various named characters. And some progress in the form of of getting that next stage of the DLC quest moving. I do think there's something hinky about the cult. I'm just not sure exactly what. Pawns of the Gene Stealers, something separate. It's honestly kind of hard to say this early on. Anyway, that said, yeah, we'll hit the pause button for now. We'll take care of the usual off-screen bookkeeping, and we will pick up here next time. See you then. Oh, and special thanks to the Raiders, the fine folks who help make these videos possible, including but not limited to Eerie V23, Revenant, Alois, Dragon Matrix 7, Drakiith, EgonAlter, Exsellsior, Gottlieb, James Trimmier, Kazorm, Mark Giemza, Nathan Welch Jr., OverlordPherom, RandomPassrby, RobbyB, Tomasz Piątkowski, Triphoppenskip, and Valinrook. Thanks for your support, guys. That said, if you'd also like to help support the channel, then feel free to push the buttons that do the things. Trust me, it does make a difference. Or you could even check out the PayPal, the Patreon, the Nexus GG, or the YouTube memberships. Links are in the description.
And place your trust in someone truly desperate.